This is an overview of a vertical composition system which allows you to have events starting without having a fade-in, but also having fade-ins if you want that. So each of these cubes here contain an Fmod emitter. Move over here. And so this is trigger 1 here. And if we go over here, we have here, so we've got trigger piano. And in the middle here, we have something called Fmod start all events, and that has event start all events. So if we look at the Fmod setup here, so the start all events here has a command instrument for all of the events that we have. So these ones that are referenced, like this. Guitar pulse, main drums, and so forth. And this is where the actual audio is. I'll come back to how this is set up in a second. And then here we have trigger drums, and these ones are incrementing or setting the parameter or a parameter. So in this case, we're setting trigger 2 here, and we're setting it to value B. And this is pretty much the same for all of them. Go on here. Now if we go back to the instruments here, with the exception of the Moog bass, which starts from the beginning. So we'll take the main drums here. One of the problems that you have if, jump back to Unity. One of the problems that you have if you would just have each event here being started randomly either randomly from a script or randomly when the player ran through the trigger, is that because the events here are not in sync with each other, even though they're playing the same tempo, they're not in sync with each other. So that means that they're starting wrong places and the wrong time. So the way to work around this is to start all the events from the beginning. So this is this one here. Start all the events. And then once, but when they're started, they're all just playing around this section here. So there we go. But because this transition here is set to the value, and it's set after 2 bars, so that means if I now set this to value B here, I'll set it to value B here, that's where it's jumping over. So this will be in time because it's essentially looping around this. I mean, if you wanted to, you can set this as a transition region also if you want to have a faster transition instead of 2 bars. Or if we look at the instruments here, so if we take, for instance, the piano here. Oh, where's the piano? So the piano are 8 bars. So these ones here, the first one is 8 bar. So if I set this to value B, it's not going to jump until we get to the end of this. And here we go. There it comes. But again, because it is set to a specific bar, or 1 bar, 2 bars, half a bar, whatever it is, that means that it's always going to be in time because this is playing from scratch. So start all the events, starts everything, but it doesn't actually jump into the music part until we set it with one of these triggers here. And these triggers here are the ones that are in the different trigger cubes here. The Moog bass is different because that one sits as an anchor, and this will play until I trigger the piano one, and on the piano one it will jump to a fade out here, and it'll go into an empty because at this point something else is playing. You can obviously set this differently, and if you had a script you can obviously have other ways of triggering it, but I'm just setting it up to demonstrate how it works. Now if we go back to the main drums, for instance, zoom out here. So after we've triggered the drums, so it's gone from this empty and into the first loop, we can now set transitions from this point, and these are just set on probabilities. So they will just essentially jump over to here, and over here we've got fade in, fade out. So the way that you would normally think about a vertical composition. So it fades in, fades out. If we have a look at piano, the piano works the same. So the piano has a fade in and fade out, but it also has a section that has an attack. So of course there's obviously multiple ways to set this up, but the way that I've done this in order for this to work, I have a loop in the beginning, and that is just looping, and then the first transition here is set to value B, and then here on value B, which is it's going to loop attack, which is this loop here, and that is obviously also just looping. This transition region here is just set to an additional value if I want to set this up so I can move it via script. The event here, the instrument event, is set to sync, and that is so I can have an ADSR here. So it will trigger, so once it reaches the end of this and it moves over to a loop fade here, we'll get a fade out from the first one. And then there's just probability here, and then these are also set to probabilities. These you can obviously play around as much as you want to with this. Again, this transition region here is just if I want to do this differently from the script, and the transition region here cuts from half a bar. So if I wanted to go in the middle of something, it's just to shut this down, then it would do that much quicker than the entire length of this. Now in Unity here, these are just set up as triggers, so trigger boxes, colliders. But of course, if you would set this up with a script instead and you randomized in between, you could also very easily set it to start again and have, rather than a fade in, have a straight attack, because you essentially just set whatever value this one is set to, which has an attack like that. So it'd be quite easy to jump in between the different articulations, i.e. fade in or non-fade in. And of course you could obviously stop and start all of them if you wanted to, or if you also wanted to, you can of course move over to a completely different section if you want to move into from a vertical compositional idea to a horizontal compositional idea. So there you have it, vertical composition with fade-ins and retained attack transitions.